Hello? Is it the M2 frame build you're looking for? Well, you found it. Let's jump in. So, you can build your frame in lots of different ways. This is smaller than the frame that we're about to build in this video. The main frame is for 4x8 cutting. And if you're going to change something in this design or in the design that's in the user manual, which you can find on our M2 resources page, there are 4 big things you want to keep in mind. Number 1, the bottom of your wasteboard needs to be 12 inches up from the bottom of your legs. To get that height correct, you want to have it 12 inches up. So it's going to be sitting on your legs at a 15-degree angle. That's number 2. Those brackets with the largest side down, that sits your wasteboard and your top beam at a 15-degree angle. So that's super important. So it needs to be 12 inches up on that 15-degree angle. Number 3, your motor offset, which is the distance between the top of your wasteboard and the top of your chains where they come off of the sprocket right here, needs to be at least 18 inches. So 18 inches is our target motor offset number right there. We want to make sure that that distance is the same no matter what your frame looks like. And then number 4, and the most important, your wasteboard and your top beam have to be level and equal distance from each other. They have to be the same distance and level, because if they're not, your M2 is going to slant and cut, and it's not going to cut properly, so it has to be level. Now, the size of this is only limited by the chain length. You can make something huge. You can put this on the side of a boat if you wanted to, but here's the thing. You have to keep those things in mind when you're doing it. And if you want to change something or change something in the design, then jump into our owners group. That is an awesome place to find all of the cool designs and things that anybody's doing for these frames, because the frame can be built in lots of different ways, but this is just kind of a standardized version to help you out. Another thing that you can do if you need help is we have a beginner's onboarding session every Thursday. So you can jump in there into that live video conference and ask us for help. Anything about building the M2 or the frame, we're in there to help out. And then number 3, reach out to us. You can hit us up on our website, on Facebook, or support@makermade.com, and we'll get you going. All right. So let's jump in, and here's the parts list that we're going to be using through this video. So here's all the things that we need. Here are all the tools that we are going to use and all the wood that we're going to need as well for this frame design. Now, if you have another frame or you want to do something different, this might shift around a little bit, but this is what you're going to need for the standard design. There are 3 main parts of the frame. 1 is your top beam that's going to hold the motors. 2 is the wasteboard that you're going to clamp or screw the material that you're going to cut to. And then 3, your M2 itself. Enough of me yapping. Let's go ahead and get building. So to build the wasteboard, you're going to cut 2 of the 2x4x8 boards in half to make 4 legs. Now it's important that these legs are spread out with 1 on each end and then the other one's in the center, because these are going to hold our wasteboard flat. So you're going to line up all 4 of these boards on one end and then measure a foot up from the bottom, so 12 inches up. And then use a speed square to draw a line. And the reason that we're doing this, because underneath that is the next step. That's where you're going to place your 1x6x8 footer board across the legs. So your wasteboard sits on this, and it needs to be 12 inches up from the bottom. So you're going to place that on there. And then you're going to screw in each one of those footers into the wasteboard, and just make sure that that footer is lined up underneath that 1 foot line that we had on there. So you can use those D1 screws from bag D to screw the wasteboard into the legs. And then this makes sure that you have a 1 foot off the ground and that it gives you a solid base for your wasteboard to sit on to make sure that it's going to be square. Now, once your legs are screwed into your wasteboard, you're going to take that last 2x4x8 and lay it across the tops of your legs. And then what you're going to do is you're going to screw in the 2x4x8 into the top of each one of those 4 legs, and then from your wasteboard into the top of that. And this is going to be another step that ensures that your wasteboard is flat, because if it's not flat, then as your M2 is moving across it, it's going to curve and it's going to cut, because it's going to be going with the grain and that bow in the wood. So that's why we want to try really hard Now what we're going to do is we're going to mount the stud mounts to the wall. Now these hold your wasteboard at the top corners at a 15-degree angle when you're cutting. And that 15-degree angle is really important, like we mentioned, to make sure that all the angles are right for the math of our M2. So go ahead and measure 2 studs in your wall that are 8 foot apart where you want to put your wasteboard, and then go ahead and mark them. Now, if your stud mounts are a little bit off one of the edges, that's fine. Not all studs line up, and that's totally fine. The main thing that we want to do is just place them on the same part of our wasteboard. So with the larger part down, closest to the ground, we're going to place those on the top edge of our wasteboard. So line your wasteboard up against the wall, and then find your studs. This was easy for us because we didn't have any of the main like plaster or anything on the wall. So you can see where we're going here. So hold that on there, and when it's leaned against there, go ahead and attach it into the wall, and attach one of those in there. And make sure that it's level, make sure that it's straight. It's really important that you attach it in there straight. Now on the other side, we're going to measure the distance from the ground from that one end and attach the other one the same height up on the board. So we're not attaching it to the wasteboard yet. That's a step that you can do later. We're just attaching the stud mounts to the wall. So go ahead and put those 2 stud mounts on the wall and make sure that they're both level, and then lean your wasteboard against the stud mounts. So once it's leaning against the stud mounts, now you're getting to that 15-degree angle that we're shooting for. So we're going to lean it against those stud mounts and then arrange it until it's level across the top. So use a level to make sure that it's there. Maybe move it up or down or kind of around a little bit. And then clamp it to your mounts. So clamp the wasteboard on there when you know that it's level. So it's really important that your wasteboard is level at the top. So we're going to go ahead and kind of shift it up and down a little bit and then put some clamps on there to hold it down. Now, mark 10 inches up from the top of your wasteboard, the top edge of your wasteboard, up on the wall above each one of the stud mounts. So this 10 inches, this is where the bottom of the top beam stud mounts are going to go. So we measure up from there and then draw a line with your speed square on each one of those, because what this is going to do is this is going to give us at least 18 inches from the top of our wasteboard to the top of our chain, which that is our motor offset that we're shooting for. So we want to get that 10 inches to make sure that's there. Measure and mark the exact middle of your 10-foot top beam. So measure the distance of the whole thing and find out exactly where the middle is, and then make a line. And then do the same thing on your wasteboard, because we want to line up the centers of our top beam and the wasteboard. That's super important. This is also a good time to mark the exact center of your wasteboard, so you can measure your actual wasteboard width, because it's never 4x8. So measure your actual width to find the exact center and then make a mark there, because we're going to need that for our calibration to make sure that you always set your home position to be in the exact center of your wasteboard. And we'll use that later on in the calibration stage, so we might as well just do that now. Go ahead, and once you've got the centers marked on your top beam and on your wasteboard, now you have that equal distance that we can line it up with, and we are going to measure from the middle of our wasteboard, that center, out to the stud mounts. Now we know where the stud mounts go on the top beam. So take that number and from each side measure out from the middle of our top beam, and that is where our stud mounts go. So go ahead and attach those stud mounts onto the top beam. Again, for that 15-degree angle, we want to have the larger side closest to the ground, and use those D1 screws again and a speed square to make sure it's straight, and also make sure that they're the same distance up from the bottom of your beam. It's really important that your measurements line up. So the pilot holes are something that you can do, and we did a 1/2 inch from the bottom just to kind of help it get it in place, just to make sure that they're in the exact same spot on each one of them. And use that speed square to make sure that you're mounting it straight, because that's going to make it easier to level here in a bit. Now we're going to attach our mounts for our motors to our top beam. So they've got this little tongue on the front that you can put a screw in. So go ahead and line it up on the ends of your top beam, and then with that part on the front, so 1 screw goes in the front, and then 2 to 4 in the top. You can put all 4 down there, make it really secure if you want. You can use those D1 screws. And then we forgot to do this. What we should have done is put the motors in there before we mounted it. So definitely recommend putting the motors in the top beam before you put it up on the wall. So you're going to place the motor in the bracket, and then you're going to slide the E4 washers and the E3 screws. So those are from bag E, so the washers and the screws. You can check out the user guide to find the picture of those. And then you're going to screw all 4 of those into the motor to make sure that the motor goes into the motor mount. And then use the E1 motor sprocket by inserting the E2 grub screw into the gear hole. So all these are in bag E. And then align that with the flat side of the motor shaft. And then tighten it with the E5 Allen wrench. Then you're going to repeat that process on the other side. So this next section was beautifully filmed on how to mount the top beam. However, as you can see, that beautiful filmmaking was us pointing the camera at the ground. So this next part, I'm going to be talking about the top beam, but it's going to be the film from when we are actually mounting the chain. So it's just kind of for reference. So, you know, to mount the top beam to the wall, what we're going to do is we want to use those measurements, those 10-inch marks that we made, to lift up our top beam and get it pretty close to where it needs to be, and then we're going to level it before we screw it in. So to mount it, we're going to line up the top beam with those marks that we made. So it'll be 10 inches up from the bottom, so that we'll line up those lines with the bottom of our mounts. And then screw one screw into the top of one of the sides. And then go to the other side and use your level on the edge and screw the other side in with the hole in the top when your top beam is level, to make sure that it's nice and level. And then go ahead and when you check both of those, then check that it's an equal distance between your top beam and level between the top beam and the wasteboard. So you want to make sure that you have the same distance on each end and in the middle from your wasteboard, and also to make sure that you have the wasteboard and the top beam are level with each other. So it's super important that they are level with each other when you put them on there. So when you're sure they're level, then go ahead and put the screws in the bottom. And then now you're ready to place your material on there. So to place your material, you can clamp it on there just like we did with our wasteboard. Also, you can screw it in too, so you can screw your material directly into the wasteboard if you want. And if you'd like to mount the wasteboard to the stud mounts instead of just using clamps, well then what you would do now is go ahead and clamp down on the stud mounts and your leaning wasteboard, and you've made sure that it's level, and then go ahead and mark on the back of your wasteboard with a pencil exactly where those stud mounts are. And then when you get those marked, then you're going to unscrew the stud mounts from the wall, and then you're going to screw them into those marks that you made in the exact same spot on the back of your wasteboard, because you have to screw in from the back side. And then once you get those screwed in there, then go ahead and, since now you have pilot holes to line them up with the studs, screw in one side and then use a level and move the wasteboard kind of in or out a little bit to make sure that it's level before you screw in the screw into the top of the other side. Now you won't be able to put the screws in the bottom of these stud mounts when you use this technique, but you can make sure that the ones are in the top and that it's level. As long as it's level, then you're good to go. So you can secure it that way if you'd like. So now it's time to put our chains on our top beam. So to put the chains on the top beam, you can do this a couple different ways. The main thing that you want to do is to go 1 inch from either the top or the bottom to mount your chain, and then mount your chain probably around 6 to 9 inches from the end. We've found that that's a pretty good location. So pick a measurement, let's say 6 inches from the end, and then 1 inch down from the top, for instance. So you can go 1 inch down from the top and 6 inches from the end. We've heard from the community that that is a great place to have these chains, because what we're going to do is we're going to put the nail in the top beam that's going to hold the chain in place right there. So we can measure in on each side, 1 inch from the top and then 6 inches from the end, and then put that nail in the middle of your chain and hammer it in. And we're going to do that on both sides. And then you're going to drape the chains over the motor sprockets that we did earlier. So those sprockets that we did in the end of the motors, and then you're going to loop them toward the center. And then when you pull them toward the center, you're going to put the little sprocket in them, and that little sprocket is in bag A. So go ahead and take that little A2 sprocket and put it inside the chain, and then get the quick link, which is in bag B, so it'll be B1, and then put that into the sprocket with the nut on the quick link facing out. And then go ahead and tighten that. And then stretch it across and do the same thing on the other side. Now be really careful, because the spring tension can pull the chain really quick, so the chain can fly, because that spring can act like a catapult and whip the chain around the motor. So be really careful with this part to have a good grip on the chain when you're pulling it to the spring. You can also see where I'm draping the chain to get more slack. So I'm pulling it over the sprocket and then locking it in place to get a longer length to be able to place the chain on there too. So you can do that, and then the chain can actually get held by the motor sprocket itself. The last thing that we're going to do is we're going to mount our M2 sled to those chains. So we're going to go ahead and get the cotter pins, and those cotter pins are in bag A, and we're going to hold the sled up against the wasteboard in the middle, and then we're going to pull the chains over, and you might have to kind of measure the chains over a little bit, maybe about 30 inches or so, and pull the chain through the top of that motor bearing carriage, and then in the second link, in the second to last chain link, you're going to put in the cotter pin with the flat side down, and then that's going to hold it in there. And then now when you can move it over to the other one and then do the same thing on the other side. And the reason that we want to pull it through and put it in the second to last pin is the last pin can be a little bit weaker. So we want to make sure that we have that whole link to hold it in there and make sure that it's set. Then go ahead and let it go, and it should kind of rest there. And now you're ready to put your bricks in your router, and put your bricks and your router in your M2 sled, and you'll be ready to rock. You did it! Or maybe you didn't do it, maybe you just watched, I don't know. Well, if you need help, as we talked about at the beginning of the video, you can check out the owners group on Facebook, you can check out our beginners onboarding session every Thursday, or you can reach out to us at support@makermade.com or message us on our website or on Facebook. We are here to get you going. So I hope this video was useful to you. You can check out our M2 resources page for our most updated version of the guide that goes step by step through all of the things that we talked about in this video, and it's real detailed. I definitely recommend doing that when you're making the frame, because there's a bunch of stuff for you to go through. So you can go through that guide to help you out. And if you need anything at all, let us know or hit up the owners group, and let's get you cutting and making. So have fun out there making, stay safe, and enjoy your new M2.